Cocaine made me feel a lot happier. It made me very energetic. It made my mind think. I thought I could solve the world's problems.
It's a very, very seductive drug. It's almost like a woman.
If you don't consider the mental at all, it is probably the closest thing one can have to an orgasm.
The obsession that I had for cocaine far exceeded any obsession I had for any other drug.
It's exciting. You can just stand still and go 90 miles an hour.
To me, once I started using it, I couldn't pull my nose away from that table.
Today, about 12 million Americans are regularly using cocaine, or what they think is cocaine. Most of them think it's safe. It isn't.
I had a beautiful family, I had a beautiful wife, I have a beautiful daughter, and I lost everything. I lost it because of that damn drug.
Last year, 1981, we had altogether 9 cocaine-induced deaths in this community, of which 6 we know are fairly confidently were due from snorting the drug.
I know that you can snort enough cocaine to kill you. I learned that from firsthand experience.
It's quite possible, and I don't know what the probabilities are, but we see people dying of snorting cocaine at least once a month.
Snorting deaths are definitely on the increase.
These young servicemen have one thing in common. They're hooked on drugs. The drugs they took for fun now dominate their lives. In most cases, it is not a single drug, but a smorgasbord of so-called pleasure drugs. An intoxicated driver hit this car head-on and killed 2 people. That driver was intoxicated not on alcohol, but on pills called Quaaludes. Because of that, the law could not punish him.
For the last 10 years, it's been a steady upswing on drivers that are driving under the influence of drugs as opposed to alcohol. But yet the laws haven't changed to protect the innocent out on the street.
The main difference between a driver intoxicated by Quaaludes or marijuana and a driver intoxicated by alcohol is that in 2/3 of our states, a drug-intoxicated driver can have a serious accident, kill people, in fact, and have an excellent chance of escaping punishment. That is only one example of how our society is being challenged by a phenomenon we have been slow to recognize: the use of pleasure drugs other than alcohol by more and more Americans. Not celebrities, not slum dwellers, but adult, middle-class Americans who get their fun by chemically altering their brains with pills, pot, cocaine, and a variety of other substances, many of them illegal, many of them dangerous. In this report, we'll look at a few of them and some of their effects on our health, our highways, the places where we work, even our national defense.
NBC News presents Pleasure Drugs, The Great American High.
Cocaine is the most glamorous, seductive, and sought after of all America's pleasure drugs. Songs are written about it. Once it was the drug of the rich and famous. Today it's found at bars, parties, and sporting events at all levels of society. Something like 20 million Americans have tried it. Almost every trendy bar has its clique of weekend cocaine users, as often as not snorting it in the restrooms. Those who like it say it makes them feel good, at least for a while. And they use it because they believe it's safe, especially when sniffed or snorted through the nose. Kimberly Bray of Miami was one of those people. At age 19, she was what her friends called a recreational user of cocaine.
She used cocaine mainly just as a weekend thing, where when you would go to a party, as people would drink alcohol or whatever.
The fact is, Kimberly Bray didn't have much time for drugs. She was an outdoor type, she had a full-time job at a law firm, and she took college courses at night. But on the evening of April 7th of last year, Kimberly decided to relax with friends. She went to this bar in South Miami to listen to this band. According to witnesses, she drank only a few glasses of red wine. Then she left to go to a party at a friend's house.
She was out with friends. She was in a partying type of atmosphere. And
Dr. Charles Wetley, Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Dade County, told us what happened next.
Her apartment, she said she was tired and that she wanted to lie down for a while. She snorted some cocaine, lay down, and then had a minor seizure. Apparently got up for a while, laid back down again, and this time she had a very violent seizure, which essentially shook her off the bed, literally. Her friends tried to administer resuscitative attempts on her, but to no avail, and she finally died at the scene from the cocaine. Now, this case is interesting because we have witnesses' accounts that she never used cocaine, or she didn't use cocaine that evening anyway, by means of injection or freebasing or anything else, and that the entire story is one of snorting cocaine.
So Kimberly Braid did something that she, like millions of others, believed to be safe, and she died.
Kimberly loved life, and I don't think that she would have done anything to have taken her life. I don't think that she realized the danger of snorting coke. I don't think that she had the knowledge that this could kill her. I've never heard of anyone being killed from snorting coke until Kim died.
There are no comprehensive national figures on deaths caused by snorting cocaine. One reason is that traces of the drug disappear rapidly, even after death. But in Dade County, Florida, last year, there were 6 deaths attributed to snorting cocaine.
The only thing we can say is that the pattern seems to be an individual who has snorted 2 to 4 lines of cocaine, and which is not an unusual amount for them. And then perhaps they snort 1 or 2 more lines of cocaine somewhere in the evening, and then 30 to 60 minutes go by without any problems, and then without warning, they go into sudden grand mal seizures, like a full-blown epileptic seizure, and this is rapidly followed by respiratory collapse and death.
As best you can put the stories together, we see people at party situations who seem to be doing the same amount of drug that everyone else is that you're still talking to. We feel that there is something called reverse tolerance.
Reverse tolerance means that a cocaine user can build up a tolerance to the drug, causing him to use greater quantities to get the same effect. Then, for some unknown reason, that tolerance can suddenly reverse itself.
What is a safe dose for a person today can become a lethal dose tomorrow.
Cocaine is toxic, there's no doubt about that, and that it is a poison, and we have to keep on reminding ourselves that there's a skull and crossbones on the cocaine bottles that we use pharmaceutically.
Dr. Ron Siegel of UCLA has been studying cocaine for more than 10 years. He believes the most hazardous thing about it is the way that many users become totally dependent on it. He thinks the danger of dependence is greatest when the drug is ingested by the process called freebasing. Freebasing involves chemically separating the pure cocaine basic alkaloid, vaporizing it with a blowtorch or other intense flame, and then inhaling the smoke through a pipe. What is it about freebasing that makes it so attractive to heavy users of cocaine?
It's pleasant. It is probably one of the most pleasant chemical experiences that you could give your brain. And the brain recognizes this and will overshadow all other systems in order to continue to get it. Now, the interesting thing about it is that tolerance to cocaine develops very rapidly. That means you need more and more of the drug in order to recapture that initial experience. So as cocaine leaves the body very quickly, and the effect is only maybe 15 to 30 minutes long, you want to recapture that high immediately and smoke some more. But the more you smoke, the more tolerant you become, and the deeper the withdrawal, the depression that you're going to feel when you don't have it. In order to ward off that withdrawal and recapture that initial high, you go chasing that high with more and more cocaine.
Hi.
I'm Dr. Kopp.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. How you doing?
Fine.
Okay, what are you here for?
Well, cocaine.
Dr. Jules Tropp works in the addiction treatment program at South Miami Hospital. Dr. Tropp is an expert on the dangers of freebasing cocaine.
When was your convulsion?
When I was freebasing coke.
Freebasing?
Yeah.
Okay.
He came by his knowledge the hard way. By his own account, he is a recovering cocaine freebase addict.
The consumption increased to the point where it became the most important thing in my life. I wanted to go to that place that freebase could bring me to. And what was happening was that nothing else mattered. I always had the necessary equipment to make it and enough cocaine, and I always used it. I used it when I was traveling. I used it at home. I used it when I went out. At the very end, I even used it when I was working. And at the end, beyond that point, I stopped working and did nothing but sit in the house and smoke freebase day and night.
Dr. Tropp didn't try cocaine until he was 47 years old. Like many physicians, he thought it was a relatively harmless, non-addicting drug. He tried snorting cocaine at a party and liked it. Then a friend introduced him to freebase. Within months, freebasing had become the only important thing in his life.
As long as I had it, I didn't care. I stopped working. I stopped seeing my family. I had no friends because I didn't want any friends. And it was me and freebase and nobody else. And that's what I did for long periods of time. I wouldn't come to the office for weeks. And when I did, I had to come in and go real fast. And I'd stay up for 8, 10, 12 days at a time. Didn't know if it was day or night.
Dr. Tropp has been off cocaine for nearly 2 years now. At age 51, he is slowly paying off his enormous debts, rebuilding his life, and making a new career in addiction treatment.
And some days, you're not going to feel better. Some days
that's
it's lousy.
Right, it is.
He credits his family with persuading him to seek treatment, but he admits he sought help only after he became frightened by his experience with cocaine.
I imagined and experienced things that weren't happening. And if I didn't have some friends that had come by and told me these things didn't happen, I would have sworn probably to this day that they did happen. And I remember that was a time that I got scared, because that was the time when I saw reality and myself parting company. And there was no enjoying those hallucinations. I couldn't live with those. That was one of the reasons that I went into treatment.
In California, we talked to a woman who continues to freebase and continues to see visions. Her pen name is Tony Davidson, and she believes that freebasing cocaine has put her in touch with extraterrestrial beings.
The appearance of apparitions and UFOs, you see them and then they're gone. And there is a control on that too, which is the sonar, which the people call supersonics, or frequency pitches.
In your own case, the ability to perceive these apparitions, these
appearances, the beings,
came subsequent to your freebasing cocaine.
I would say that my first acknowledged experience of the other side came after, the understanding of it came after I had ingested the freebase.
Tony Davidson has written a book about her experiences and her methods of smoking freebase cocaine. She also talked to Dr. Siegel of UCLA, and for him she wrote a paper about her encounters with the psychic and extraterrestrial.
The one time that I did meet with her, she was very toxic, and she was displaying all the classic signs of a cocaine psychosis. Not only that, but she had all the classic signs of the history leading up to a cocaine psychosis. That is to say, she had progressively gotten more and more dysphoric after using the cocaine, which
more and more
dysphoric. That means no longer euphoric, but now becoming sad, depressed, and melancholy. And to treat and medicate herself for that dysphoria, she started taking more cocaine. which catapulted her into the next stage, which was to become extremely paranoid and hallucinatory. And she had visions of extraterrestrial beings that would visit her through posters that were hooked up and plastered up in her bedroom. And she would have auditory hallucinations, conversations with them.
I see forms, shadows, silhouettes.
Of what?
Of human-like beings.
The prognosis, though, is excellent. As soon as she stops using cocaine, those symptoms will clear within 96 hours. And you won't see any evidence of that behavior. But she continues to use cocaine chronically and keeps those blood levels going up all the time and maintains a constant level of excitation.
You once told me that you had freebased for 30 straight hours. Is that your record, or have you freebased on one occasion longer than that?
30 hours. 30 hours, I'll tell you something, when there's no time in the psychic, 30 hours is like 6 months. People lose time when they get into the psychic domain because time is man-made.
Most experts now agree that smoking freebase cocaine can lead to an extremely destructive dependence. But some people doubt that merely snorting cocaine can have that same destructive effect. When this report continues, we'll look at the experiences of a young doctor and a young stockbroker.
Jimmy, Alan's going to give you the dates so you can write a ticket. I shorted the stock to him, okay? So just run it out of position. All right?
Pat Moore is a stockbroker in Denver. He never freebased cocaine. He never injected it with a needle. But 5 years ago, he began sniffing cocaine on weekends. And according to Pat Moore, he became totally obsessed.
When I first started, friends, the people that I bought the drug from, or here, try a little bit, Pat, it won't hurt you. It's not an addicting drug. It's not like heroin. It's not like amphetamines. You don't get addicted to it. I found out differently now. After 3 different treatment programs, a psychiatrist, losing my marriage.
Charles Beard is a 30-year-old internist who practices in the small town of Sterling, Colorado.
I want you to turn your head to the left just a little bit, okay?
Like Pat Moore, he decided to tell his story in this report because he thought it important that the public realize that, for some people at least, sniffing cocaine can lead to a dangerous dependence. Yeah. Dr. Beard began sniffing cocaine at parties during his medical residency. He never freebased or injected cocaine because he understood the dangers, but he thought snorting was safe.
I noticed as I used it more and more that although it was fun for a shorter and shorter period of time, and that I was starting to get depressed after I came down and would be depressed the following day or two. Towards the end of my use, I was feeling that exhilarating feeling for mainly only minutes, and then was quite depressed and would have to do more, and the cycle would repeat itself. The use escalated progressively, and I was not really aware of it because cocaine is such an insidious drug. You are attracted to it and you do it, and you don't realize that you are obsessed with obtaining it and associating with people that do it until it's too late.
After his 3rd try at treatment, Pat Moore has managed to stay off cocaine for 6 months. But he lives alone now. His wife of 6 years left him because of his bizarre behavior and the large amounts of money he was spending on cocaine.
The 1 month that it hits me, that I can give you an exact dollar figure, is the last month that I did cocaine. So that was September of 1981. I didn't have the cash at the time. I had been through 2 banks because of bad checks. I didn't have a lot of money coming in. Bill collectors were calling. I got myself into that financial trouble we talked about earlier. That month, I did a little over $10,000 in drugs. I can tell you this figure now because I could add them up on checks. I mean, cash, certain person, cash, certain person, withdrawal, and it came to a little over $10,000. This is when my wife had had it. She said she couldn't take it anymore.
The house where Pat Moore lived with his wife and daughter is up for sale, and he's still stunned by what cocaine did to his life.
I owed the dealer, I think I owed the dealer at this time $1,200. I gave him my $1,200 motorcycle. I had a 16-foot catamaran. I forget how much I owed, so I made a deal. I swapped him the catamaran for the drug debt. I was thinking about the other things that I could trade off. You know, that's what was scary. I was trading everything off because I didn't have cash. I wasn't making the kind of cash at the time. But I still couldn't get off the drug. If it's so easy as everybody was telling me that it's not addicting, why didn't I just quit? I couldn't quit. I couldn't quit.
It has been 5 months since Dr. Beard went into treatment for his cocaine dependence. He has not used the drug since, but his 2 years of heavy snorting very nearly wrecked his marriage. He remembers hallucinations, paranoia, and fits of depression so severe that he was tempted to commit suicide.
I realized that I didn't want to live, that I wanted to die. And I put the knife up to my chest and held it there for a long time. But I didn't do it. I was afraid to do it, and something inside of me told me not to. The last experience was very frightening.
Of the millions of Americans now snorting cocaine, no one is certain just how many are having serious problems with the drug. But the latest figures available indicate that the number of people being admitted to government-financed clinics because of cocaine tripled between 1977 and 1980. And there is a major complication in trying to figure out exactly how serious all of this is. Many Americans who think that what they are snorting is cocaine are wrong. According to Dr. Siegel, nationwide, the average substance being sold on the street or in bars as cocaine contains only 13% of actual cocaine. The rest of the mixture can be anything from anesthetics to baby powder to amphetamines. Furthermore, studies at the University of Chicago indicate that even experienced snorters can't tell the difference between real cocaine and some substitutes. The large-scale use of cocaine is relatively new, and as a source of problems, it is still minimal compared to America's favorite pleasure drug, alcohol. Americans are fond of booze, and our society pays dearly for that fondness. An estimated 10 million Americans are alcoholics. Each year, more than 30,000 Americans die from alcohol-related diseases. Nowhere are the dangers of alcohol more obvious than on the highway, and we have been very slow in coming to grips with them. Every year, fully half of the fatal automobile accidents in this country involve alcohol. In 1980, more than 26,000 Americans died in alcohol-related accidents. With public outrage growing, President Reagan recently established a commission to find ways to curb the killing by alcohol-intoxicated drivers. But the new pleasure drugs intoxicate too, and some of them are causing a new wave of accidents like this and complicating our drunk driving laws in ways we never anticipated. In this accident, these two young people were killed by a driver who crossed a median strip and struck them head-on. That driver was stoned, not on alcohol, but on methaqualone. Methaqualone is the active chemical ingredient in a sleeping pill that most people call Quaalude. Quaaludes have become a menace on American highways.
In 1980, we had more fatally injured drivers intoxicated with methaqualone than we had intoxicated with alcohol. We had a total of approximately 58% of our fatally injured drivers were intoxicated. 25% of those individuals were intoxicated with methaqualone, and 24% were intoxicated with alcohol.
Tilt your head all the way back like you're looking at the stars.
No, I am not drunk.
These tapes taken by the Broward County Sheriff's Department show how someone high on Quaaludes acts.
Just relax.
These drivers were pulled over for erratic driving. Tests proved negative for alcohol, but positive for methaqualone.
How have you done this before?
It's just now, you know, I got this damn drug in me.
Pardon?
I got all these drugs into me.
Yeah, what kind of drugs?
Just pot and Quaaludes.
Pot and what else?
Quaaludes.
Here.
Quaaludes are a legitimate prescription sedative. But on the street, they have a reputation as a fun drug, a relaxant, even an aphrodisiac. Because of their popularity, hundreds of thousands of counterfeit Quaaludes are smuggled into this country from South America. Actually, Quaaludes are nothing but a sleeping pill that is addictive and extremely dangerous when used with alcohol or when driving.
I think that in the United States at the moment, methaqualone is the most dangerous drug of abuse which we have. The reason for that is primarily related to the fact that it has the most effect upon people's coordination of any of the drugs which are popularly available. In other words, to obtain that euphoric high of being mildly intoxicated, you become also unable to walk, to drive an automobile. And for that reason, particularly from the driving of automobile standpoint, that methaqualone is killing hundreds and thousands of people in the United States.
It's happening all over, and people don't realize it. They're out there on the streets. They're driving. They can't even, when they take drugs, they can't even walk or talk, and yet they're getting behind a wheel.
Sandra Lorenzo lost her husband, Kenneth, in an accident caused by a driver using Quaaludes. In August 1978, Kenneth Lorenzo was killed along with a female relative when an oncoming car swerved across the center line and struck Lorenzo's Cadillac head-on. Lorenzo's sister-in-law was seriously injured. The man who caused the accident was George DeMoya. His blood was negative for alcohol, but positive for methaqualone.
In the DeMoya case, we took the blood and it contained a very negative amount of alcohol as opposed to a positive amount of drugs. We brought the evidence into court. We went through the system, and the judge ruled that the drugs could not be entered into evidence as far as the blood because of the implied consent law. It stipulates alcohol content only, and he had a very minute amount of alcohol as opposed to the high level of drugs. Without the evidence, we had no case. Mr. DeMoya never spent a day in jail. He drives now in the state of Florida.
He's taken away from my son a chance to grow up with the father, his father, and it hurts. It's hurt us a lot. I don't think we'll ever get over it.
The Florida law that allowed George DeMoya to go free says that by accepting a driver's license, an individual thereby grants his implied consent to a blood test if he should be incapacitated after an automobile accident. As in most other states, the Florida law specifies that the blood may be tested only for alcohol. Therefore, the methaqualone content of George DeMoya's blood could not be considered in evidence. The implied consent provision that makes it possible to check the blood for alcohol makes it very difficult to test it for anything else, and that restriction still exists in more than 2/3 of our states. As of today, only 14 states permit testing for other drugs when a driver is involved in a serious accident. Florida is in the process of changing its law to permit blood test results to be used in court. That, however, will not guarantee a conviction, because unlike alcohol, where a blood alcohol count of 0.10 is considered legal evidence of intoxication, we have no such standards of intoxication for other drugs. Tests have confirmed and reconfirmed that smoking marijuana makes it unsafe to drive a car. And the government estimates that more than 22 million Americans use marijuana regularly. Yet we have hardly begun to devise tests and set standards for driver intoxication. Except for a few scattered and outdated studies, we have no idea how many accidents and fatalities are caused by drivers high on drugs other than alcohol.
There was a study in Massachusetts some years back that found that 17% of the drivers responsible for fatal accidents were stoned on marijuana at the time.
Dr. Robert DuPont, former head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, thinks that too many people are dying on our highways to waste time experimenting with standards of intoxication.
That is, they'll say, but we don't have a standard for intoxication. In other words, they can show with the urine test that the person has used, let's say, a drug like Quaaludes, or they can show that they have used a drug like marijuana. But what is the level of legal intoxication, the way we have with alcohol? And that has been the cop-out. That has been the carpet that they've swept this issue under. Well, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who has any marijuana in their system or any Quaaludes in their system is driving impaired, as far as I'm concerned, and that ought to be the standard.
The legislatures in the various states are often very slow in responding to coming up with solutions to new social problems. And as a consequence thereof, generally speaking in the United States, you can, with a great deal of impunity, drive, weave all over the road, run down pedestrians, kill innocent victims, and nobody will bother you very much as long as you're intoxicated on something other than alcohol.
America's armed forces also are struggling to cope with the new patterns of drug use. Beneath the pomp and ceremony and spit and polish, the military have traditionally had a problem with alcohol. But the services recruit from our young people, and young people have been in the vanguard of America's changing taste in drugs. The services say the new drugs are a threat to health, discipline, and our national security. And their attempts to eliminate those drugs have caused some startling changes. Example, the Army recruit barracks at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Once it was drill sergeants patrolling the squad rooms in search of dust and untidy footlockers. Today, in all the services, you're likely to find specially trained dogs, like this one, searching for the scent of marijuana.
Here, Sergeant!
The Army thinks it has no choice. In Europe alone, drug abuse costs the military the equivalent of 4 battalions of infantry a year, because that many servicemen and women are either in jail or under treatment or assigned to prevention programs. According to a Defense Department survey, the Marine Corps and the Navy have the worst problems. Almost half the young Marines and sailors surveyed had used at least marijuana recently. Many had used it along with other drugs.
Unfortunately, what we have in the United States Navy is a direct input from society. In other words, these youngsters have come from a life of where the norm is drug usage. And with that, when they join the Navy, it doesn't really necessarily mean they're going to stop.
Back in high school, I always said, the people that didn't get stoned or high or whatever, I thought they were kind of, we just call them straight, we didn't really associate with them very much.
I figured the drugs was the best escape. I used it. I used anything, mainly pot, used a lot of cocaine, Quaaludes, anything, go from up to down, down to up.
These servicemen, all of them heavy drug users, are under treatment at the Navy Rehabilitation Center at Miramar in California.
I thought these drugs are great, they're changing me and they're...
The center has been operating for 10 years, but the young men and women arriving here today are more difficult to cure than those in the past.
I would say that the youngsters come here for treatment today have been using a wider variety of drugs for a much longer period of time in their life, and some of them are very damaging. And one of the significant things I've noticed is that we have actually more mental problems evolving from that. I mean, people who are truly psychotic or neurotic as a result of a chemical change in their body.
Physical conditioning is a major part of the routine at the rehabilitation center. The treatment here is a mixture of modern therapy and strict military discipline. These men were all sent to the rehabilitation center because of extreme drug abuse, dependence, or addiction. After 7 weeks here, the Navy decides whether they will be sent back to their units or discharged. More than 70% of those sent back to duty managed to complete their enlistment.
You know, trying to stay afloat, and your strength is gone, you're weak.
Most of these men brought their drug habits from civilian life into the Navy with them. And until recently, the Navy could do little about that.
Has anybody here ever been?
But today, for recruits like these entering the Navy in San Diego, things are different. Prodded by Congress and by the publication of several surveys showing widespread drug use, the Navy recently announced an all-out effort to eliminate the use of illegal drugs. An airplane crash on board the carrier Nimitz last May added to the pressure. Autopsies on the bodies of 10 deck crewmen killed in the accident showed that 6 of the 10 had been using marijuana.
We saw in the Nimitz report that there were others, although not directly involved with the flight, but that were not on the flight deck, that were under the influence of the drug. And the substances, various kinds of substances, because today it's not just one substance, they're chemical gourmets. They're into everything.
Rear Admiral Paul Malloy is the man in charge of the Navy's new effort to wipe out illegal drug use.
The matter of some scientists say, Admiral, in fact you yourself say, that the Navy was pretty slow in catching on to what was going on. What was the reason for that?
Oh, honestly, I think our generation didn't understand the pervasiveness of the abuse. Also, when you're in a very proud organization as we are, and Hayward, and pride and professionalism is done to our Navy. If you look out there, those people are just looking sharp, are sharp. You're reluctant to say, we're all messed up by yourself. But fortunately, Congress, in directing that survey, got our attention.
The Navy's anti-drug program is the result of that attention. It begins on the recruit's first day. In between immunizations, haircuts, and lectures, each new sailor is required to give a urine sample, which is tested for drugs. If the results show marijuana use, the recruit concerned is warned. From then on, throughout his Navy career, he will be tested periodically. If one of those subsequent tests reveals drug use, he can be discharged. If the initial test reveals use of a drug like heroin, cocaine, or PCP, he is out. Throughout training, recruits are reminded that drugs could affect how well they perform and their buddies perform in a sudden shipboard emergency, like a fire. And there are frequent warnings.
It simply states, the illegal possession, use, and distribution of drug and drug paraphernalia are not tolerated in the Navy at any time, whether ashore or afloat, whether on or off duty, whether on or off the base.
The Navy's new effort to detect and deal severely with drugs extends to all ranks and all ships and installations. Like John Paul Jones, the Navy says it has just begun to fight. It has become the first major American institution to confront the spread of illegal drug use head-on.
It's not going to be easy. If some of them have had years, we're talking indulging from age 12, and then suddenly they walk in boot camp and switch. But there is no choice. We cannot tolerate drug abuse in the armed forces.
In the civilian workplace, from the boardroom to the assembly line, the new pleasure drugs are joining alcohol as a major source of problems.
And it appears that we're just beginning to recognize this.
Drugs in the workplace is the #1 public health problem in this society today.
2/3 of what is happening on drugs and alcohol is suppressed. The only time you see an alcohol or drug problem is when it reaches the surface, and by that time, believe me, it's well developed.
Treatment centers and clinics handling the alcohol and drug abuse problems of American industry have become a $450 million business.
I don't want to die. I don't want to go to prison.
Centers that used to specialize in the treatment of alcoholism report a new pattern.
In the beginning, it was alcohol. Now we're seeing just people coming in with smoking pot, using cocaine, popping Quaaludes.
We now have at least half of our people here using cocaine when they first come in. We also see more and more younger men and women, meaning under 30, who only use cocaine.
Companies with well-established programs to help problem drinkers among their employees also are finding that they have something new to deal with.
I tried everything that came down the pike. Acid, mescaline, you name it.
And in the morning when I wake up, I'd reach over and pick up 2 Quaaludes to take so I could stop shaking.
I walked around some of the buildings and smelled marijuana in a hallway or in a bathroom. We get calls from managers who say, I have somebody here that was smoking in the parking lot or in a restroom or some other area. The old days when a man was just grateful to have a job is not enough. Today a man wants a job and a woman wants a job that it offers fulfillment. And their escape from that is to frankly blank out the 8 hours that they spend in work.
In many places, the use of drugs like marijuana has brought new tensions into labor management relations. The Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in California has a brand new program to help salvage employees who are in trouble with the new drugs. Even so, the company and the workers' union have been feuding over drug raids the local police have made on Lockheed property at the company's request. The raids resulted in the arrest and dismissal of dozens of employees.
We build a very sophisticated, complex, high-technology products. We simply can't tolerate drug and alcohol problems within our industry. And we've got to do something to see that we operate considerably better than industry averages or community averages, and that's what we're about.
Drugs in the workplace are not always a source of controversy between labor and management. Here at the Kaiser Steel plant in Fontana, California, the union and management have agreed that in certain circumstances, an employee may be given a blood test to determine whether he has been using marijuana. Most union locals won't go that far. They think blood tests could be used as a form of harassment. And some younger workers are still not convinced that marijuana can affect their work.
It's a common delusion that marijuana is a drug that doesn't do anything to you. A drug that doesn't do anything to you, nobody uses. People use marijuana precisely because it does something to you. I think the only people who can say that marijuana doesn't affect their work don't have much of a job or don't give much of a damn how well they perform it. Every marijuana smoker I've ever known will sit up ramrod straight and look very disturbed when I ask him if it's okay then if the neurosurgeon who is going to work on him should have a couple joints before he goes in the OR. Immediately, the most tolerant marijuana smoker becomes bigoted as heck. No way, Doc. We don't want none of that.
Dr. Joseph Persh is the medical director of Comprehensive Care Corporation, the nation's largest chain of treatment centers. He believes both unions and management are just beginning to understand the costs and how high the stakes are.
They're beginning to realize that it's their #1 headache. I think they turned the corner when they realized that every automobile that runs off the production line, the amount of money invested in that car in the form of steel is exceeded by the amount of money invested in the form of health care. And the bulk of the money invested in health care is incurred by employees with alcohol/drug problems.
One of the most successful programs to assist employees with those problems is at the General Motors plant in Lockport, New York. Bud McKenna, the United Auto Workers representative, and Jim Davis, the company representative, often walk the line together. Because of the program, the plant probably has fewer problems than one would expect in an assembly line operation with 9,000 employees. The two men share counseling duties, and one or the other is on call 24 hours a day.
Bird and find yourself.
What was happening to you with your life?
Between them, they have helped several hundred workers, among them this woman.
Even when I was just on the drugs and not the alcohol, to keep my system going all the time. And that is a full-time job, trying to juggle 9 different pills and still be able to walk into a plant and do a job.
The cost to American industry of drug and alcohol abuse is estimated conservatively at $10 billion a year. Some experts think the hidden costs in productivity and product reliability are much higher. Why are so many Americans using drugs? What should the country do about it? We'll try to provide some answers when this report continues.
Our society is abusing these pleasure drugs more because we have the time and the wherewithals to afford it.
We have taught people through every form of commercial advertising that when you're unhappy, you don't feel good, what do? You take something. You add something to your life in a chemical form that'll offer you relief.
People will find endless rationalizations. What they won't face, though, is that the reason people use drugs is they like the feelings that the drug produces. Drugs are reinforcing substances. They produce pleasure on a chemical, biological basis. That is so much more important than all the sociology and the psychology and the history. The main fact is biological, and that is what people don't want to face.
There seems to be a basic motivation among our species to use substances to alter their consciousness. And that we have always done this as a species. And other species do it too. Other animals turn on in nature and use other plant drugs. We're not the only one. And I think it's about time that we seriously consider the possibility of researching and developing safe alternative compounds for people to use when they want to recreate and when they want to entertain themselves and when they want to enjoy social situations. And I mean compounds that are a heck of a lot safer than marijuana and safer than cocaine and safer than alcohol and safer than tobacco.
It's my impression that there can be no such thing as a safe pleasure drug. Even if it had no harmful physical side effects, it still would have it would still be overused by some people who cannot get pleasure in other ways.
If you assume that people would not use these drugs where they put other people in jeopardy, on the highway, let's say, or on the assembly line, why shouldn't adults use pleasure drugs?
There's reason to believe that incessant stimulation of the reward or pleasure centers of the brain will lead to a resetting of the pleasure threshold so that ordinary enjoyable things no longer stimulate that area, or if they do, they aren't effective, and one can't enjoy ordinary life, so that all one has left are the chemicals.
If we keep using drugs the way we are, we're going to go down the chemical dumper. I think the only solution is that more and more of us can become enlightened enough, educated enough, and able to deal with reality enough so that we can persuade others around us to not use mind-altering chemicals.
Under public pressure, most of our state legislatures are now debating stiffer penalties for alcohol-intoxicated drivers. It's about time. They should also be looking at the problem of the drug-impaired driver, who can be just as lethal on the highway as any drunk is. But revision of the highway laws is only part of what has to be done. Even though most of the so-called pleasure drugs are illegal, our efforts at law enforcement have not made much of a dent in America's appetite for those drugs. And that's where enlightenment comes in. Most Americans who use these drugs are not trying to kill themselves or others on the highway. and they're not trying to wreck their lives with a cocaine habit. For the most part, they begin using a drug thinking it is safe, just as Dr. Tropp and Dr. Beard told us they did. So the beginning of a solution seems to be this, that Americans, physicians and laymen alike, understand that the pursuit of pleasure through drugs can be very risky. I'm Edwin Newman, NBC News.
Later on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, guest host Bill Cosby welcomes Marie Osmond and Steve Allen. And stay tuned for Late Night with David Letterman. The Dallas Times-Herald says it's laugh out loud funny. Tomorrow night, Sarah rides a mechanical bull on Real People. Then right after the Facts of Life, don't miss Teachers Only, followed by Quincy. Tomorrow.
NBC News produced this program and is responsible for its content.